In today's video, we're going to talk about assigning contracts versus double closing when you're wholesaling real estate. What's up, everybody? It's Jamel Gibbs. Welcome to another video. Listen, I know I've been putting out a lot of podcast episodes. You guys seem to be really enjoying those podcast episodes, but I also don't want to get caught up in a mix, right? I want to make sure that I'm giving you guys a blend of different types of content. It's good to get a different perspective from different angles of the real estate investing business, whether I'm in the field, whether we're getting a different perspective from a guest on a podcast, or if we're just doing a face to camera video just like this. So let me know what you guys like the best. What's your favorite form of video content that we've been putting out? Some of you are gonna say you like all of it. Some of you like a specific type of video. Either way, I'm gonna continue providing you guys with the value that you need to go from where you are right now to where you wanna go in your real estate business. And I truly appreciate the support that you guys are providing me on this channel. I'm about to hit 10,000 subscribers probably within the next week or so, and I'm looking forward to continuing to grow this channel and be one of the biggest real estate channels on YouTube. But listen, in today's video, I really wanted to talk about a previous experience I had from a deal. So I want to talk about assigning contracts versus double closing on contracts. And there's three key points that I want to make in this video. So stay tuned. Watch this video until the very end so you can find out what those three key points are. First and foremost, let's jump into it, right? What is assigning contracts? Well, when it comes to wholesaling real estate, when you sign an agreement to purchase a property with a motivated seller, you then have what's called equitable interest in that property. You can then go ahead and simply assign your rights in your agreement to your end buyer for a profit. So you would do what's called an assignment of contract agreement with your end buyer. They'll see how much money you're gonna make on the deal, and ultimately they'll close the transaction with full disclosure. They'll know what the purchase price is. They'll also know what you're gonna make on the deal, all right? And that could be a problem, but in some cases, it's not a problem. And we'll talk about that in full detail in just a moment. Now, on the flip side of that, what is a double close? So we understand what an assignment of contract is, right? What is double closing on a real estate transaction? Very simply put, a double close takes place when you close the A to B transaction and you also close the B to C transaction the same day. So I'm talking real estate language right now. What does all of this mean? A to B, B to C, right? So the A to B transaction is between you and your seller that you're purchasing the property from. So your seller is the A, you're the B in the transaction. Then you turn around and close the B to C transaction between you and your end buyer. So in that case, an A being the seller and you're being the B, you're actually gonna bring physical cash to the table. It could be transaction funding, it could be your money, it can be, wherever you get the money from. That's considered an A to B transaction when you're physically closing on the house, all right? Then you can turn around and sell the house the same day. So you can purchase it and then you can sell it the same day, hence the B to C transaction, right? So you got the A to B between you and the seller, and then you close that transaction, and then you turn around an hour later and sell it on a B to C to your end buyer. Now there's some benefits to doing both, right? When it comes to assigning contracts, you don't have to pay closing costs 2 times, and you can make more money on the transaction, right? Simply by assigning your contract over to your end buyer. On a double closing type of scenario, you're going to pay closing costs 2 times. You have to bring cash to the table. And if you don't have access to your own capital, you're going to pay for the money so that you can be able to close the transaction. Generally, you can pay up to $1,000 to borrow the money. Sometimes more, sometimes less. But it just depends on what transaction funding company you're actually going to use. But the benefit to using a double close type of transaction is no one's going to see how much you're going to make on the transaction. So when you close the deal between you and the seller, you're actually closing the deal. The seller will never see how much money you're gonna make when you sell that property. Same thing happens on the B2C transaction, right? When you close between you and the buyer doesn't see what you're gonna make on a transaction. Now, going back to the seller situation, there's obviously ways to close a transaction if you decided to assign your contract to where the seller doesn't ever have to see how much you're gonna make, right? It's called a blind HUD, a seller side only HUD, all right? And you can literally close a transaction where the seller only sees their side of the transaction. Obviously, you have to find the right attorney or title company that's willing to do that for you, but I do it all the time. So that becomes useful when you're assigning contracts and you don't want the seller to see what's actually going on. But on the buying side, the buyer will still know how much you're gonna make because they're gonna get the complete HUD. So that's assigning contracts and that's doing a double close. What I wanted to talk to you today was about a recent experience that we literally just had within the last week or so, where a buyer was giving us a hard time on how much money we were actually gonna make on the property. And that brought up this conversation. Should we assign contracts or do double closings on contracts? Is there a threshold that we should start considering when it comes to double closing versus assigning contracts? That's pretty much what I wanted to talk about in today's video. So let me give you a little bit of backstory. Recently, my team locked up a deal about 2 to 3 weeks ago. They locked up a deal. It was a small package deal here in my local area, and they locked it up at $62,500. Very nice properties. It was a duplex on one lot, and then right next door, it was a single family property. So 3 units total. We picked it up for a little over $20,000 per unit, literally $62,500. So we immediately put it right back on the market for $79,900. And when I tell you we got a flood of buyers that came in from that particular ad, I mean, we really built up our buyers list even more on the Facebook marketplace on this one property alone. Craigslist ads were booming. I mean, just a flood of people interested in this particular package deal. And with that being said, because there were a lot of people interested in this particular package deal, obviously that boosted the price up, right? So our very first offer on it was $89,000, $10,000 above what we were asking. We had another offer that came in for $85,000, and then we had another one that came in at $83,000. Those were all of the offers above asking price. Unfortunately, all of those offers fell through, and I'm gonna explain why in just a moment. Long story short, we ended up selling the property to a buyer who's gonna close on it on March 12th, which is this coming Friday, and ultimately we're going to make $13,000. But here's how things fell apart with the first 3 buyers who were north of the asking price. Really, it was the first 2 buyers. The third buyer just simply backed out. I'm not sure why. So generally, what happened with this property was it needed to be sold sight unseen. So we couldn't take buyers through the properties because there's tenants in the property, and ultimately they were concerned about the COVID situation. So we ultimately didn't show the property. We told people up front that the properties needed to be sold sight unseen and they needed to be sold as is. Now, the good thing is the properties were in pretty decent shape. They were actually not in bad shape at all. They were solid properties. So we had that first buyer come in at $89,000. I'm really not sure. I'm willing to bet I know why he backed out, and it's probably the same reason why the second buyer backed out, but I can't confirm that, all right? So I'm not even gonna speak on that. But ultimately, the first buyer backed out who had the $89,000 offer. The second buyer came in and he offered $85,000 sight unseen. So we sent him the assignment of contract, and he saw on the contract that we were gonna make over $20,000 on this particular deal. So he canceled the contract the next morning and said that we were price gouging on this house. And I was taken back by the fact that he said we were price gouging. So there's a couple of key points I want to bring out about this, right? This is the basis of why I wanted to do this video. Number one, when should you assign contracts versus double close? I'm gonna share that with you in just a few minutes. The first key point I wanted to make was, if you're ever working with a buyer and you're wholesaling real estate and your buyer sees how much money you're gonna make on a deal, and let's just say it's $20,000, $25,000 like it was on this particular deal in our case, and your buyer says you're making too much money on that transaction, your next line should be, we shouldn't be doing business together then. And here's what I mean by that. Number one, if you're providing value to your buyer, if you're bringing off-market deals that your buyer can't find anywhere else, you're investing your time, you're investing your money, you're investing to a team, whatever the case may be. You have a vested interest in finding these deals. And if you come across a buyer who says that you're making too much money, or they're upset that you're making too much money on these types of transactions, you need to lose that relationship with that buyer immediately, because that buyer is looking to control how much money you're putting in your pockets. At the end of the day, if you're providing value, if you're bringing good deals to the marketplace so that your buyers can make a lot of money on the other end, they should never care about how much money you're gonna make on a transaction. So there's 1,000, there's 10,000, there's 100,000 buyers out here today, right? You should never be building a relationship with the one buyer who cares how much money you're gonna make on a transaction. In fact, these buyers should be happy that you're making a lot of money on these transactions, and they should wanna keep you happy. Tell them to go find their own deals if they're digging their hands into your pockets at the end of the day, all right? So the takeaway from this is, if you're ever working with a buyer and your buyer is feeling like you're making too much money on a transaction, kill that relationship right off the bat. Don't ever do business with a person like that, all right? Which brings me to the second key point. When should you assign contracts versus double close? Well, in my business, we generally assign contracts 99.99% of the time. That's all we're doing. I don't care if my buyer sees how much money I'm actually gonna make. If the buyer is upset about how much money I'm gonna make, I'm gonna follow rule number one. I'm gonna lose the buyer. You wanna work with buyers who want to see you win. But is there a point in time where you should consider assigning your contract versus double close? Well, that leads into point number 3, right? I believe, and this is something that we're gonna incorporate into my personal real estate business from this point forward, is I believe that if we're gonna make between $0 and $10,000, and let's forget about the 0 because I'm not ever gonna take $0 on a deal, anything up to $10,000, I believe it's a safe zone to go ahead and assign your contract. Anything north of $10,000 may be the type of deal that you want to double close on. All right, so for example, if you're gonna make, let's say, $1,000 to $10,000, go ahead and assign your contract. And if your buyer still cares how much money you're gonna make, you really need to lose that type of buyer. You need to lose that type of buyer anyway. But if you're gonna make $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 on an assignment fee, you might wanna go ahead and double close on a transaction, because it could put a bad taste in the seller's mouth. The seller will ultimately see how much money you're gonna make on a transaction unless you use a seller side only HUD. And then the buyer is going to see, okay, I'm paying this guy $50,000 in addition to what I could have gotten a deal for. Could have, and that's the key word, right? The buyer, if they wanna go out and find their own deals, they can, right? But they're coming to you for the deals. And at the end of the day, to me, they shouldn't be counting how much money you're making in the first place. But to my point, on the third key point that you want to keep in mind is, if you don't have a relationship with a particular buyer, let's just say it's a brand new buyer, never bought a property from you before, should you double close if you're going to make a certain amount of money, or should you assign the contract? I'm starting to see that if you don't have a relationship with the buyer, then you should probably nurture the buyer first. Let them see that you're bringing value to the table, and then you can start assigning contracts with them. Here's what I mean by that. I believe that, again, $0 to $10,000 should be an assignment all day long. But anything above $10,000 should be double closed until you build a relationship with a buyer. So for example, you send a buyer 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 deals on a double close type of transaction before you actually go ahead and assign the contract to them. by then they can actually see the value. They've made money with you. They know that you're gonna bring a good deal to the table. And they're not gonna beef because they know that they're gonna make money at the end of the day. So they ultimately want you to make money as well. And at that point, once you nurture the relationship with the buyer, then you can go and revert back to assigning contracts. So that's the game plan that I'm putting in place from this point forward. I believe that anything between 0 and 10,000, we're gonna go ahead and assign it. Anything north of $10,000, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do a double close until we build a relationship with the buyer in order to be able to revert it back to an assignment of contract and save a couple grand on doing double closes, okay? But if right off the bat, you assign a contract and your buyer cares how much money you're making on a transaction and you decided not to double close because you're assigning it and your buyer is beefing about how much money you're gonna make, I believe that you need to lose that type of buyer. So 3 key points, right? Number 1, if your buyer is digging their hands into your pockets, lose the relationship. Number 2, I think that anything between 0 and $10,000 needs to be assigned. Anything north of $10,000 needs to be double closed until you build that relationship, which leads me into number 3. Once you build a relationship with the buyer and you've helped them to make some money in the marketplace and they can see your value, then you can go ahead and revert back to an assignment from there. So that's generally what I wanted to talk about today. When is a good time to assign contracts versus double close? I hope you guys found benefit in me ranting a little bit on this particular topic. I thought it was a really good topic to talk about, especially for people who are brand new in the business. When should you do what and how should you do it? I think that this video will help a lot of people moving forward. I almost lost out on a $25,000 assignment fee. Now, granted, I did take a little bit of a hit on the deal, about a $5,000 hit from what we were asking, but being that it was sight unseen and we were still able to make about $15,000, $13,000 on this transaction, I'm still a happy camper. I only had the property for a couple of weeks and it's just another package deal down for us, adding to the pot, right? So do me a favor, let me know what you thought about this video. What are your thoughts on assigning contracts versus double close? Do you agree with me? Should you double close until you build a relationship with your buyer, or should you just go after the assignment right away? You know, should you lose your buyers if they care about how much money you're making on a transaction? Let me know what you thought in the comment section below. Also, be sure to share this video with some other wholesalers, some other real estate investors that's doing some heavy business or just getting started. Somebody else needs to see this video, so share it with all your friends. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, click the notification bell. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.